Recording in progress. $100,000 income. Boy, I feel like I'm in a baseball field now. But
Now coming to bat.
at today's interest rate, you could qualify for a $240,000 to $290,000 mortgage. And so you laugh, and I think the homes over at Brookside over here are going for about $75,000 with an $800 a month HOA fee. And so you see that it's really an uphill battle, but it's a requirement that the cities, municipalities they have to adopt these strategies. So if you have any questions, or if you just want to launch into, I would rather write and listen to you than be up here talking, so.
It's work session. Vice Chair Green was first, then Pamela, but go ahead.
So
And if we can fix these mics, that'll be great.
I have a question about a couple of these that maybe we ought to take credit for, that just so we can.
You want to be able to use them.
Well, I want to be able to use, so
Vice Chair Green, can I just share that the ones Planning Commission forwarded were V, G, Q, A, D, F, J, M, U.
yes. And I wanted to talk specifically, if you look on Cassidy's chart, the green ones are the ones that I think that the Planning Commission recommended. I have a question on L, where it talks about reduce, waive, or eliminate impact fees related to moderate income housing. As we look at what are we calling that? The integrated housing zone in 2
Yes,
weeks?
yes.
Wouldn't the impact fees reduction in that ordinance for the ones that would be donated to a community housing trust qualify for that, so that we can use that as a strategy?
I believe it would.
Okay, and so we might as well get credit for that, or use that, since we're looking at. The other one is, what was the letter? Sorry, I should have bookmarked the document. The question was strategy letter W, create or allow for reduced regulations related to multifamily residential compatible in scale and form with detached single-family residential dwellings and located in walkable communities. Would the integrated housing ordinance fit that as well?
I agree with you.
Okay,
I think that both of those could be flushed. Now, use the integrated housing in a couple of the other strategies, but I think that really will be a useful tool for creating, the state doesn't say you have to create a certain amount, but I think if we're creating anything, but I think that gives us, based upon the figure I just quoted, that probably gives us as much opportunity as anywhere,
my thought is that if we can use the tool, some of the tools that that we are working on or will adopt in the city over the next for example, the one on decreased parking in a TOD, we've talked about that one enough that we know we're not ever going to go down that road.
No, and the planning commission that was probably the one they were most passionate about not doing.
And we know we're never going to do that one. But the fact of the matter is, if we can use, I want to say, as many, I would like to, if I know we have to list 6, but what happens if we list 9 or 10, and we say, so that when we give a report to the legislature, we can really say, West Jordan is on the front, leading the way in what we're trying to do with moderate income housing based on your standards, because we're trying to meet 10 of these things and not just focused on 6 like a lot of other cities. I'd rather use that as a way to tout that we're really trying to do something to show the legislature where we're going.
Agreed, and I think the planning commission, you saw they recommended 9, so they agree with your thought process, exactly. Because there may be a couple of these that just don't amount to anything. They may just be too costly for the city. The city leaders council may determine that we don't want to expend that much money on something as we get into them.
Councilmember Bloom, did you have something?
I was concerned about if we're really trying hard for, people in this moderate income to afford housing, what are we doing about HOAs who are tacking on hundreds and hundreds of dollars on top of where they're living? Is there something we can do to restrict that or do something that's not taking over our city with every single development being an HOA?
Mr. Wall, do you have any insight on that?
Not off the top of my head.
No talk on the Hill?
Tawny, have you heard anything? I haven't.
We haven't had one new development come in that's not an HOA, and that's a problem.
Well, and part of the problem with the HOA issue is that all of the new developments are required to have a detention pond. They're required to have some of those things, so they're required to have an HOA.
But then they have their own sewer pickup, or not sewer pickup, their own trash pickup, which then takes, it's a big complicated thing overall.
So we certainly can look at getting away from those. I don't have a good answer for you tonight, but the one I quoted across the trailer park, I just looked at that for my own education and seeing, oh, well, there's a couple of trailers in here, of course, they're 40 years old, but they're $75,000, $80,000. But then when I saw the astronomical HOA fee of $800, I thought, wow, that just makes a $600 a month house payment to $1,500, so.
Well, and that one's kind of an anomaly because they're renting the land underneath and it's not just the utilities. But Tawny, is this something, Councilmember Bloom is right in the fact that HOAs can get out of control with all the stuff. I'm reading a master development. I was reading a master development agreement over the weekend. Scott wishes I wouldn't have, and Larry wishes I wouldn't have, but that master development agreement or master development plan requires that the garbage and the snowplow be covered by the HOA, and this is going to be a development that's really just an extension of a couple of city streets. So is there a way that we can help influence the legislature to reduce the footprint, if you will, of an HOA, that we say that, the reason why HOAs exist is to cover the cost of their detention pond and maybe some of their open space that's required, but not to get extravagant and rely on that the economies of scale with our snow plows and our garbage agreements. And is there a way we can do that? Because we can't do that at a city level, but certainly the legislature can.
Sure. The short answer is yes, absolutely we can. And I think just a tiny point of background would be last year Senator Harper sponsored quite a large bill that covered HOAs, what they can do, what they can't do. We did support him in his efforts to that, and that bill did pass. You're balancing Property Rights Coalition members' needs with kind of the public's needs. I think that's how Senator Harper would characterize what he was trying to do. And the Property Rights Coalition has some really good friends of the legislature, which can make that a little challenging. But I think the short answer is yes, and that's something that we can look at. You're probably, in terms of HOA fees, Councilmember Bloom, you're probably looking at more of like a circuit breaker type program or a top out type program than really top-down legislation on what can and can't be charged. And I think when you get into what can they charge, like can they do snowplows, can they do, garbage removal, that's probably a little bit too detailed for the legislature. I say that with a with a little bit of smile on my face. And Rob maybe has a little bit more background having served up there for so long, but short answer is yes, we can continue to look at those. We can continue to support Senator Harper's efforts. Larger answer is it's a tricky one.
Yeah, I would add one thing to that, now that Tawny's brought that up. In years past, when there wasn't so much influence on the Hill with the building community, it was not uncommon for developers to agree through a development agreement to a specific standard of maintenance at a certain cost. And if that didn't happen, by agreement, they agreed that the city could take over the maintenance and impose, through a recorded document, costs on the individual homeowners who didn't pay. And typically, those were less than what the HOA was charging. Another thing that has happened a lot over times, but again, it's not, we can't mandate it. It's an option of the developer. I know of another number of circumstances where a developer has used, this is a private street, for example, as a marketing tool. And then later on, the HOA realizes they don't want to pay for that, and so they come to the city and ask the city to take the street. I believe, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, we require all streets to be built to city standards in the event that does happen. But again, that doesn't really address Councilmember Bloom's main concern, as long as the legislature is constituted the way it is.
Councilmember Pack?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I don't disagree with the conversation. Thank you, Councilmember Bloom. I always like looking at the unintended consequences of any actions in that regard. So I was a homeowners association president for 4 years, not here in West Jordan, but it always works both ways. You know, we ask a developer to put in open space, so we have tot lots and dog parks and a basketball court, but you know, who would really maintain that if we don't have an HOA, then we don't have those amenities. And then I look at my neighborhood where I live, not trying to make a disparaging remark against any family or circumstance that might preclude being able to take care of a yard. I live at the back of a cul-de-sac, and let's just say that the yards are less than desirably maintained getting to my home. Not that I'm an immaculate master gardener either. But I'm just using this as an example of any one of these letters that we choose to forward on, to realize that there's always unintended consequences. The HOA could, well, it's proven that it raises property values in the neighborhood, but of course, what's the trade-off? You're paying more per month, but you ultimately have more inequity because of a well-maintained area. So again, I don't disagree. I just hope that with any one of these, we have this devil's advocate conversation on which consequences are we willing to live with as a result of our action. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey?
I was going to share a comment similar to Councilmember Pack, where a lot of the reason for the HOAs is because of the city and the requirements, whether it's a tot lot or we've said, you know what, you've got to add certain amenities if you want to have greater density. Well, if we've got to have a clubhouse and a pool, the city's not going to pay for that. Or if we're going to require, like those sound barriers on the outside of the neighborhood, that the city doesn't want to maintain the space on the other side of that, then the HOA is going to have to do that. So I think some of our requirements have pushed the creation and perpetuation of HOAs. I don't think that that's really a conversation, though, for how to address moderate housing. I'd rather kind of stick closer to the goals that have been set up by the state. Otherwise, I think we're opening a large, expensive, litigious can of worms, and I really don't have the appetite to go that route. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I have a question on D. When I asked the general fund subsidies, it kind of gets tricky, right? I mean, we don't have a general fund large enough to really do all of our needs sometimes, let alone our wants. And then we're going to say that we're going to put money aside does that count for what we're already doing? But yet if we're already doing it, we can't use it as a goal, we were told, so. So I'm uncomfortable with that without a lot more information.
Yeah, and I think that if you look, the timeline's a little more compressed on that. And so there would be several steps, working with the finance department, administration to determine if it's even feasible. Because you educated me that there's just not a lot of wiggle room in the general fund to put even $10,000 a year to moderate income housing. I don't know. It'd be something that the council, if they wanted this goal, they would have to probably commit to putting a certain dollar amount towards moderate income housing every year. Now, could that be preservation of moderate income housing? Sure. So that would be identified in the strategy and in the benchmark. But, that's one of those things that would probably come out that, when we start talking to finance and administration, it may be just too costly for the city at this point.
I'm not in favor of that one. I just don't think our city's in a position to do that
And
one.
this is the kind of feedback I need. If the council doesn't even want it as a strategy, then we can, scrap it at this point, so.
And then on J, I really like J, and think we should hold to that, and it's in our code, so, that these developments have to have a percentage of moderate income housing, so we should, stick to that. When you get to M, I took an online thing, so now I'm trying to remember. I think it was through Utah Leagues, but could have been somewhere else. Because I always am just in my kitchen, so it's hard to remember. But anyway, they did a land trust, and I really like that idea. I think it's something we should explore. What it basically does is you set aside housing, and the owners, it rotates. If you live there and you have it for a decreased cost, but in the end, when you're done with that home, it doesn't go to your family. Any of the increase, so if I bought it at 100,000 and I sold it for 110, you get the 10,000, but the home has to then go to someone that qualifies again. You can't just sell it to the highest bidder. It has to go to a qualified person. I think it's something that would be good to explore.
And I think that that's something that, you'd have to certainly get somebody a lot smarter in finance than I am. But maybe that money, the general fund money would be to purchase that initial property or participate in a land trust. I don't know if West Jordan City would want to do that on their own or partner with somebody that's already doing that in the state of Utah. That would be my recommendation. And there may be general fund subsidies, so and the ordinance that Council Member Green, they'll be coming to the council in a couple of weeks, that has a component that would require a land trust. So I think that a lot of these are interacting, but I think they should be separate strategies so the city can use them, to the benefit. So.
And then I don't remember if I asked you this one or not, but on B, do our water tanks count?
Oh, and I think the answer is, it's probably more of a question for Mr. Wall, is that is preservation of moderate income housing in the city by upgrading infrastructure. I don't know what kind of legal nexus would have to be created, Rob, with that, but that would certainly something that we could work through.
I think
Yeah.
it would be worth exploring that one.
I would agree with Councilmember Whitelock on that. We literally took, now we had to do some, Denise is gonna hate the term, but we had to do some smoke and mirrors stuff with the ARPA money. But in essence, we spent.
No, we didn't smoke and mirrors. We just
Well,
followed the law and
we
used it to our advantage.
We shifted it around but we spent $11 million on, of ARPA money, literally on infrastructure for this. We ought to, she's right. We ought to get some sort of credit for this.
And I see Mr. Davenport sitting here, and he upgrades water lines and sewer lines all the time in older neighborhoods. And many of those older neighborhoods are, for instance, I will just use Dixie Valley, is an upgraded water line, is that preserving moderate income housing? So I would have to have some work with the attorneys to establish that nexus.
Well,
You know.
even some of the stuff like the Leland Street that happened earlier this year where it broke 3 times in 3 days, right? Right, Greg? It broke 3 times and we had to upgrade that. That's a neighborhood that's is actually going through some of that moderate income. You see the houses turning over, people remodeling the fronts of those houses on that street. So I would agree that the money that we're investing in a lot of that infrastructure ought to be there.
And that was strategy B.
B, yeah.
B as in boy.
Yes, B as in boy. And then my last one is T. Could that be a partnership with the school district?
I know Corbin told me about didn't you do something in Sandy, Corbin, with Canyon School District? And so,
Yeah, I mean, T, it just says, with another local political subdivision, so sure, that could be a school district or any other political subdivision. There's some possibility for creative things. We did a project once where we took some problem code enforcement properties that were hard for the city to deal with. We used housing funds to acquire the property, clean up the code enforcement mess. It was a large lot. We subdivided it and then gave the lots to the school district. And the construction technical school students built homes built homes for their class on those properties. And then those properties were sold to school district employees.
Yeah, and I know that the school district is talking about bringing back their building. Oddly enough, they've decided that we do need people that aren't just college educated, that we do need electricians and builders and stuff. So they are considering that. So it's just something I think we might want to explore. So those are mine.
so you were D, J, B, and T, correct?
I was a strong no on D.
Strong no on D. Okay.
I like J, I like M, I like B, and T, I'd like to see if we could. And O, I think we should try to find partners to access federal monies and other funds for affordable housing, because if we don't, someone else will get it, so we may as well be the ones.
Okay.
Does anyone else have something that they want to share with Mr. Gardner before we move on? He really needs our input so that he'll know where to focus. Okay,
Okay, so then what I will bring back to you hopefully on August 24th is the strategies, with the exception of D, that the planning commission recommended. So that will be 8, and then plus these other 4. And I think Councilman Green gave me 2 others, L and W. So I will create strategies, benchmarks, and timeframes for all of those. That will come back to you on August 24th, and I don't know, do we want to hold the public hearing that evening, Alan, or I don't think we necessarily need new business because we've been talking about this.
Correct. It is like a baseball field. It wouldn't need new business because it's already been introduced to the council, so I believe we could make it work for the public hearing on August 24th.
what if we, let me go, we're almost there. Okay. When will you have those strategies ready?
Probably next week.
Okay, so what if we had 10 minutes in our next work session so that we could all review them? And then if any of you don't want one of them that's there, or you strongly, that we could get rid of it before we hold the public hearing.
I would appreciate that more than you'll ever know.
Okay.
So I'll have that to you. So that is 2 weeks away, so.
It's 2 weeks away, but council rules would require it, if it's going to be on the 10th, it's due to the office tomorrow, if you follow council rules.
I can put it in a form that I can probably get it done in the morning. It may require some additional work before the public hearing, but you'll at least have it in front of you, that there's some that you may want to get rid of. Because that will leave us with 13, 14 at that point.
We can always waive council rules.
You can, I'm just letting you know what they are.
Yeah, well, does anyone oppose us waiving council rules to have a 10-minute discussion next work session? I'm not seeing anyone that opposes that, so we will waive those. Just get it to Mr. Anderson as soon as possible.
Right, so I'll work with Alan and Cindy on getting that. And I'll try to get you something tomorrow, so at least you don't have to stay up and lose sleep.
Thank
Oh,
you.
be good. I know that, Mr. Lee, what did you
Yeah,
have to
sorry,
share?
just, I'm trying to follow the discussion and look at each strategy as you comment on it. Comment L, or strategy L, reducing, waive, or eliminating impact fees related to moderate income housing. That causes me some concern. Our impact fee funds, a few of them are in the hole, some dramatically. Those funds are required to build out our master planned infrastructure for water, wastewater, stormwater, and so on. If we want to support moderate income housing, we can pay those impact fees with housing funds or other things, but waiving impact fees causes further stress on those impact fee funds which are needed for infrastructure.
Well, the ordinance that's coming before us in 2 weeks only waives the impact fees for the moderate income housing component. So that would be whatever the number is in the ordinance. There's a density buy-up in that ordinance that allows a developer, on a 10-acre piece of property, it's about 3 units. On a 10-acre piece of property, if the developer donates 3 houses to a community housing trust, then the city's partnership with that is to waive the impact fee on those 3 houses. It's not a massive waiver of impact fees. It would be the impact fees solely on those 3 houses that are donated to the community housing trust.
So I think it would be the impact fees related to the building permit, not the subdivision. And I think the water, so it would impact the water fee somehow, but I'll
I mean,
take,
it's a policy decision, just want you to be aware of the trade-offs.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is budget. Discussion of outstanding and new matters related to the 2023 annual budget. Denise, do you have something you want to start us off with? And council, this is the time for, if there are changes that we want to make prior to our truth in taxation, we can always decrease the amount we're asking for. We cannot increase. So if you come up with things that you'd like to do that require money, then we either need to cut something or you can't have it.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go over quickly 2 items that were added after we adopted the tentative budget that we're going to discuss for a moment. The first item is the state liquor tax. So, boy, I see what you mean, Larry. It's kind of weird. Let me go over the code for the state liquor tax. First of all, it's money that we receive that is specific to or are restricted to the use of prevention, treatment, detection, prosecution, or control of violations of infractions that are related to alcohol consumption. So this is our DARE program. This is any DARE vehicle, any equipment, DUI enforcement, overtime, those kinds of things. So it's completely restricted. Now, when we receive these funds, we say we're either going to spend them or keep them in a reserve. They are in our general fund reserve, and we are keeping them kind of on a spreadsheet as a restriction. And our treasurer manages that right now. So I kind of want to show you what we've been spending to date and how much we're receiving. So in 2021, we didn't spend very much just because things were so different with COVID and we were busy doing other things. So our reserves before that, though, were almost $200,000, and then we ended with $244,000. This last year, this last budget year, we received $135,000. That tells me that liquor sales had increased substantially during 2021 and 2022, which is interesting. But we are spending about $79,000 in prevention and equipment so far, and about $40,000 for law enforcement. So again, we're going to have a really strong reserve there of about $260,000. And receiving another $120,000 next year. You adopted a budget that said you'll spend $100,000 of the $120,000, so we were expecting to add to those reserves. However, going back historically, we're seeing that some of this is now almost 2.5 years worth of reserves. So we'd really like to invest those in some equipment that will assist our officers in further enforcement of alcohol-related activity and traffic enforcement. What we're going to ask you for is we have 6 motorcycles that are on lease. They're on a 2-year lease. It's about $44,000 a year to lease those 6 motorcycles. 75% of those motorcycles are used strictly for enforcement and traffic enforcement and patrol, which feeds into DUI prevention and control, law enforcement. So we believe that 75% of that lease is eligible to be used with the state liquor tax. We would ask that you use the reserves for that, not our current year's allocations. The police would like to purchase a Faro imaging system, and if you want to know what that is, I do not know. So you'll have to ask DC Robertson in the back. But it has to do with enforcement as well, and the cost would be $56,000. They'd like to purchase some covert cameras that they put up in strategic places to capture activity related to DUIs or other activity. That would be $24,800. Cameras for the intoxilizer area, where everything is recorded when they have you do a breathalyzer, $10,000. And then this is really the whole reason we're here. We would like to expand the number of in-car and body cameras that are provided to our officers. Honestly, I thought every officer probably had a body camera. You probably think the same thing, but that is not the case. So we would like to expand our body cameras for our officers and our in-car cameras as well. We would also like to make them more of a uniform system so that they would be the images or the storage of what's captured on body cams and on in-car cameras is cloud-based, so it would be on evidence.com. It provides much easier access to evidence and footage and reduces staff time considerably. We believe that 32% of that expanded program would cost us about $73,000. This would be an ongoing expense. We would expect that our liquor tax would likely carry some of this expense every year, but that the general fund would be picking up the remainder of the expense. So this would be an increase to the general fund should we go with this 100%. But right now we're going to ask you to allocate funds to patrol and traffic units that are specific to enforcement. So they would be completely reimbursed, and then we may be able to coming back to you with a budget amendment to expand a program to cover all body cameras and in-car cameras. And then in addition, we're going to request a DARE vehicle be purchased and decked out for the city. Instead of a real vehicle, a lot of cities have DARE vehicles, and they're always like the nicest car actually in the force. The chief would really like it to be a UTV, something that's more affordable, but something that could be used in the parades and other special events, as well as in enforcement in areas where there might be activity going on that might not be as developed areas. So they would be using a UTV. This would also be a vehicle that they would take to the schools and the kids would think is cool and that kind of thing.
So I have a question, and maybe you don't know, but maybe he does. It seems like the DARE vehicle used to be a vehicle that the police force would get because they confiscated it from drug deals. Do we no longer get those kind of vehicles?
It's much harder to use those vehicles now for that purpose. Some of the recent changes and updates in asset forfeiture and seizure laws make that more difficult. So no, it's not as common anymore that we have the opportunity or the ability to get the vehicles. We haven't had one for 15 years for that purpose, so.
Okay, well, you could maybe then have your old car.
I,
Okay, thank
I,
you.
I think we ought to use a 66 Mustang convertible, but that's okay.
I'd love it.
And he's going to become the lead of the DARE program, right? Thank you. So our available reserves are $280,000-ish. We're asking for $245 to be spent, and then the rest of the motorcycle lease for the next year be covered. So we're bringing our reserves down, but we will have an ongoing revenue source from liquor taxes.
So go ahead and tell us what the FARO imaging is, because I'm pretty sure that's why you came up, and I have
I
no
just tried to
clue.
Google it and wasn't much help.
Yeah, it's an imaging system that allows for advanced recreation of accident scenes, also other crime scenes. It basically redraws the scene down to the very square inch, captures the vehicles, the distances. You take the device out to the accident scene, you run it around, and it re-images the whole thing, so we can use it for prosecution of DUI cases, for all serious accidents. It's a valuable tool that we currently use, and we need to upgrade and maintain that system.
And there isn't an ongoing cost for software for that?
It's minimal. There's licensing purchases. I don't think the licenses have to be renewed except for when you repurchase the system. So it's mostly for hardware and the initial licenses to use that.
So is this like the traffic reconstruction stuff we see when there's those major accidents, like the one that was on 2700 West at Halloween and stuff, where they have all the weird stuff and it takes all the pictures and everything?
It allows you to go back into the scene and recreate it virtually, and you can change the image, look at it from different views. It's three-dimensional, so it's really valuable for prosecution purposes.
Yeah, I've reviewed a couple of those reports after seeing some of those accident reconstruction reports, and the way that works is phenomenal. So you don't have any arguments for me on that one.
So Denise, do we have to be all in, or can we not want some of this and like the rest of it?
You do not have to be all in, and that's why we gave you a specific list.
Okay. If it were my world, we would not lease motorcycles for traffic enforcement, because that just means speed traps, and I'm against those, actually.
Those are actually already leased, so we already have, we've already
Yeah,
possessed them.
if I don't give you the money for them, you've got to get rid of them. But that's just me.
Right now, they're being paid for out of the fleet fund.
And I haven't had a speeding ticket since 1982. So it isn't that's not the reason. I'm just against it. I think it's wrong.
Right now, the lease will be paid out of the fleet fund, out of the police budget, quite candidly. So either we pay for it out of the police budget or we pay for it with liquor state tax.
Okay, so what do you want from us with this?
Well, I would prefer that we not use the general fund and the fleet fund and we use liquor tax reserves, but that is up to you for sure.
So what you want from us today is, are we okay with this?
Yes, because what we're going to do then is the budget that we present to you on, well, we're going to change the budget to be a proposed budget. And then on the 10th, you will have the opportunity to, excuse me, adopt an ordinance or a resolution. I don't know which one you're adopting. I think it's a resolution. No, it's an ordinance because the mayor has the right to veto the tax rate. So I apologize. It's an ordinance that you're going to adopt on August 10th. With that ordinance, we will say this is your proposed budget. We will include these changes in that proposed budget. So it will be available to the public, it will be available to you, and that will be the budget that you will consider on the 10th with these changes.
But if we're against it tonight, we should speak up now. Is there anyone that wants to speak up against this? Councilmember McConaughey.
Exact opposite. Completely in favor. I'm happy with what's been proposed and would happily sign off as is.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jacob.
My only, it's not really a concern, but violated principle, if you will, is there's some ongoing needs here and it's one-time money, sort of. So there's, that kind of goes against the, my budgeting 101 kind of principles. I'm assuming this gives us a one-time discount on what we otherwise would have spent out of other funds. Kind of blows my whole principle out of the water about ongoing expenses needing ongoing funding. So that's my only concern. Otherwise, I think we're good. I wouldn't even mind increasing, especially the body camera and the in-car camera budget. I wouldn't mind bumping that up a little bit more even. So, throw that out there.
Well, the body camera one's the one that's gonna cost us the ongoing expense, right?
Body and the in-car cameras both.
But the body cameras and the in-car cameras, I'm gonna say, unless I'm mistaken, I think that money is well spent because it captures what happens. And, it doesn't, when you got video, video doesn't lie. Unless you take the little 3-second clip out of context. But at the end of the day, the video doesn't lie if you look at everything. And I think at the end of the day, when we deal with the way that things have gone in law enforcement, the more tools that we can provide the law enforcement officer to capture what happened, it protects the city. It protects the officer, it protects the city. And if the officer did something wrong, then that's obvious too. And it allows us to take action that we would need to. So I think overall, it may cost us a few $1,000s in the future, but really, that's just an insurance policy. I did have one question for you, Chief. With these cameras being loaded up, so do we use evidence.com a lot? Is that what we use for almost everything now?
We use it a lot. We want to use it for everything. That's creating a lot of the work is because we have multiple systems right now, and the older systems take a long time to process the evidence through and to copy and to pass that on for prosecution. So evidence.com will streamline that, and we want to use that exclusively for our video evidence.
Yeah, I would, if we can go to evidence.com to use most of our stuff, I've seen the ability, I do a lot of probable cause screenings for a city to the north of us. And I read the police report that said, that they had that the citizen had pictures or the business had video surveillance. I gave them the link to evidence.com, and the people go upload the videos for the evidence, and the officer doesn't even have to go back and talk to the individual or try to gather it. So anything that we can do to automate that for our officers, I think we need to do that.
Okay, so we have about a half hour left and we still have a lot to cover. What else, Denise?
I'm disconnected somehow.
Well, if I can, before you move on, I counted about 3 of you that were supportive of this.
We see it like a straw poll.
Okay,
Nobody said they were opposed.
Okay.
So
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm saying you've got 7.
Perfect. So this will be how your proposed budget will look versus your budget. So nothing will change except for the one-time costs of $243,000. All right, the second item is the Department of Human Services contract. This is the work that we are doing on behalf of officers statewide. The Department of Health and Human Services, through the legislature, was given the task of providing first responder mental health support. They recognize that they don't have first responders, and the state doesn't really have first responders out of DP, except for DPS, and they were not, I don't know, I couldn't speak for them. But our chief was involved in this legislation. He was also on the committee that assisted all of this program. And he was really the best fit for them to take their first step forward in providing a program that would be statewide. He knows that our city has provided a mental health program that's been very successful so far. And we were kind of the ones that were leading the way on this. So our chief was asked by the Department of Health and Human Services to take this project forward. He is providing management, oversight, administration, consulting, so to speak, for the program. Program isn't so much for West Jordan City. It's really for the other agencies that don't have the opportunity to put together a mental health program for all of their officers. So the city has a contract from the Department of Human Services for $145,000. We are the contractor. They are asking us to do work for them. In exchange, they are asking that we use a state-approved provider, subcontractor called Blue Novus, to put together a peer support program as step one. The chief is overseeing this with his team, and we are providing that kind of in-kind support. In exchange, they're giving us $145,000, and we're just paying Blue Novus. So while it's sort of a pass-through, we're taking the money and we're paying it to someone else, we are also providing some service, and they are calling us the contractor, which is why I'm bringing it to you. So we provided some of that service last fiscal year. In 2022, we got $72,500 about 4 weeks ago, which is the first time I went, oh shoot, we're a contractor, this isn't really a pass-through. So we are going to need to amend our budget. And, oh, I'm sorry, go back. We are going to add $72,500, which is the work that's left to be done from July through probably November, with Blue Novus. So we're going to take that money in, and then we're asking for a budget amendment to the police professional and technical services to pay that contract out, as well as to provide program administration and support for the program. This will really benefit those organizations like a Vernal, for instance. It only has so many officers and they don't have peer support. This will train officers throughout the state to provide that mental health support to each other and have a platform that they can get to that health and that peer support online. So it's a really critical program, and I'm really proud of our force for being involved and our chief for leading the way.
We do get some benefit from being involved in the program by the experience and training that our officers will get. So it will advance our peer support program, which we do feel is robust, but we're still trying to meet the needs of our officers through that program as well. So that's another reason why we agreed to this.
I just wish I wish they would have just given us some overhead costs.
I agree. But understandably, we would like every dollar that's been allocated to go right back into the program, so. All right, so that's what we're asking for. Do we have support for the DHS contract revenue and expense? Okay, thank you very much. Those are the only items that I have, but I am here to help or with, mediate any of the discussion that you may have between yourselves or any questions you may have about any other items you feel are outstanding that you want resolved this evening.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, so in your packet, I attached the minutes from the budget work session of items that you had talked about. There was discussion about funding for a grant writer. I don't know if all of those got resolved to your satisfaction, so this would be the time to discuss those. There was also discussion of $50,000 for art installations. There was a discussion of a community garden. There was a discussion of flagpoles and the Veterans Park Master Plan, which is still on unfinished business. That one we do have support on. The only thing that I would caution the council is any increase in expenses, you'd have to find a source to fund it from. So.
Was that volunteering you? Should we decrease your salary? Is that what that was? Oh, no?
Yeah, so it's, you'd have to find, if you want to do something like that, you'd need to find a source of revenue to fund that position if it were a grant writer. Or it's for the $50,000, if you wanted to do art installations within the city, you can choose to do that. You just then need to identify where the $50,000 would come from within the existing budget. So those were the items. I think those are just the three that were in the minutes.
Let's go with Councilmember McConaughey and then Vice Chair Green.
Thank you, Chair. So the first regular council meeting that there was an opportunity to bring this up, that's where I asked about the grant writer. I asked about potential funding for software for citizen reporting. From your comments, it sounds like there's been nothing's happened on those. We need to figure out where those funds would come from before anything happens. There were comments from other council members saying that they'd be interested in hearing more information. Has anything happened beyond the conversation that we had during that council meeting?
Doesn't sound like it.
Okay.
Mr. Lee?
Specifically about the grant writer or about the software for citizen reporting?
Yeah, those two that I had
Yeah,
specifically
those two weren't in the
requested.
initial mayor's budget, and we're waiting, we haven't changed the budget proposal since then, yeah. We do have an employee on staff who does grant writing as a significant part of his job, Jeremy Olson. He's quite good. He has helped us achieve and receive a number of grants, but as far as a grant writing position where they do that and nothing else, we have not. As administration, we didn't propose it in the mayor's proposed budget, so there's not an ad there.
Somewhere on the line, along the line, I think we have to take a hard look. And I agree with Councilmember McConaughey. We need to take a hard look at good reporting tools. GoGov.com. I've looked at several. Most of them don't look like they're that expensive because they roll these out for all kinds of cities and law enforcement agencies and all kinds of things. And I think that I don't know where the research lies. I have no problems if we task Cassidy to do it or somebody else, but I agree, we need to look at the reporting tool. The way we currently report is not easy. I think if we had the right phone app, and we look at it correctly, there's a way that not only people can report, but if they have the app, we can push information. And any way that we can better connect with our citizens through those kind of apps is something that we need to do. And so somehow we need to look at that and figure out what that is.
So we've heard from two. Are there two more that would be supportive of a phone type app where people can report?
I would. South Jordan's got a pretty easy one, and I've been on there.
Okay. All right. So Mr. Anderson, we have at least four. You can count me in your voting. We would like to ask that someone, either our staff or administration, look into that and see what it will cost. And we can always do a budget amendment, right, folks? So if it isn't in this budget, doesn't mean it's not happening till 2024. We can do a budget amendment. So,
I will follow up with the administration.
Mr. Lee, do you have questions?
No, we're happy to come back if that's a priority to get more information on that and consider it. We're happy to come back with some more detailed information and cost proposals.
Okay. How do you two feel?
Oh, I'd like the idea of it.
Yeah. So you've got plenty. Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Worthen.
So on the grant writer, I think for now, we talked in our last meeting about getting more clarity on what's been applied for and what we've received so we can see more of that. I think that would be beneficial to kind of see what's resulting from all of that. So and instead of saying, hey, let's just get another grant writer, let's see what our current one is.
Agreed. Yeah, one of the internal comments we had was, oh, if you're saying we need a grant writer, great, thank you, but we also need to report back to you better on the successes we are having and the work our grant writer, granted, he's wearing four hats, but the work that he is doing, we need to report back to you better on that, for
So
sure.
could
Yeah,
we
so
get
that
that on a reports to council, please, Mr. Anderson, on an upcoming meeting?
Okay, I will do that.
Thank you.
Can I bring something else up then?
Go ahead.
Okay, so then, as far as the federal lobbyists, we had talked about maybe just postponing that for a while till we have a better plan and using the staff that we currently have. And maybe same kind of thing as what's happening now, what's the result of it, and let's analyze it a little bit more and look at it maybe next year?
I'm in favor of removing that until we have more definite plans and we know what that money's really going to do and what it can do for us, what we anticipate, what all of that looks like.
I mean, there is some being done now, obviously, maybe same kind of report of what's been done, how much is, where it's coming from, and then maybe say, okay, if we had someone else, this is other things that we would be lobbying for, this is what, something in writing, so that we can read a report over of what we're getting now and what we could be getting.
Okay, so we're up to 2. Is there 3? Anyone else want to take 100K out for federal lobbyists?
In a heartbeat.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So we've got 4 or more.
Wait. When you're saying I thought I was hearing opposition to the federal lobbyist.
Right, to take out the 100 grand out of this current budget for the federal lobbyist.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were saying, do we have 4 in favor of taking 100 grand for a federal lobby? I would very
no.
much like to pursue it and see what we can do. So I'm in favor of taking 100 grand for the federal
You want to
lobbyist.
keep it in?
I want to keep it in. Well, I think the ROI on it is something we desperately need for our city.
Okay. Miss Councilmember Pack.
I wanted to
Thank you.
keep it in
Yes,
too.
I too would like to see, I'm a proponent of letting professionals do their jobs, and if you have a lobbyist and that's this person's job, he or she knows how to do it. My experience has been, as Councilmember Bloom mentioned, that the ROI is usually there, not always. So yes, definitely report back so that we understand not only the activity and effort, but also the results. What are the results? And with all of the federal money being issued with the current administration, I would assume and hope that a lobbyist would be able to acquire more funding than we are paying him or her.
That's always the hope.
I'm not saying,
So-
I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying I'd like to see a better plan put in place and see what's currently happening now before we just say, let's go spend $100,000 on a salary. Let's, I just don't think we get, no offense, I just don't feel like we have like really good ideas of, like with the grant writing, we really don't know, what's being done. So do we know we need to add a person? That's kind of where I'm at. I don't feel like there's enough information yet.
Councilmember Jacob, you're the only one we haven't heard from, so.
All right, I tried to squeeze in a word edgewise there. No, I'm in favor of keeping it in the budget as well.
So you have 4 to keep it in.
Yep.
So it stays.
You don't mind if I give you a little bit of clarity on, Jeremy reports to me and he's part of my department. But he does do a lot of grant writing, but the majority of it has to do with state grants for the most part, not at the federal level. The federal level, we do put some in, but it's very limited. A lobbyist would allow us to put a lot more or have a lot more presence in the, in DC versus not. I'm not supportive or not supportive. I don't really have a stance on this, but I do want you to know that that Mr. Olson's work is very good, and we will be preparing and are preparing a report for you on a regular basis. So it will come out on your weekly reports, but we'll also provide you more professional report in a council meeting. So thank you for the opportunity.
I'm just going to go on record that I think it's irresponsible that when we're talking about a high inflationary rate and we're talking about raising taxes, that we decide that it's the most appropriate thing to do is spend almost 1% of a property tax increase to pay for a lobbyist. That can be delayed, and I disagree with that, but I will be in the minority on that one. Lobbyist doesn't apply for federal grants. A grant writer applies for federal grants. And honestly, I think we could get more money by hiring a grant writer than we can by paying a lobbyist. But I will note that we are in the midsummer now. There will be a ton of deadlines coming up for grants, particularly things like AmeriCorps. And AmeriCorps might be a place where we can get a grant, pay for an AmeriCorps person that becomes a grant writer, and get somebody to pay for our own grant writer. So we need to look at those kind of things. We've got to step outside the box, use things like AmeriCorps and RSVP, and be able to leverage
other people's money. I get that the feds are handing out money, but I agree with Councilmember Worthen, and we haven't seen a good plan yet, and so, but I'm in the minority, so I'll leave it at that.
And I concur with you. Councilmember Pack and McConaughey.
Thank you. With the current grant writer wearing 4 hats, as Mr. Lee said, perhaps that's part of the issue is the time is just so finely allocated. Would there be merit in that statement, Ms. Stack, that if we had someone that could provide more time and effort instead of 25% juggling 4 jobs, is there any reallocation of duties to other personnel so that more time could be freed up to really focus on grant writing? I'm thinking of my experiences on nonprofit organizations where you're usually on the grant writing committee or the fundraising committee, but you're doing that amid your job and your family and anything else going on in your life. So you're lucky if you kind of get around to doing one grant here or there. So, but if someone's really dedicated to the effort, it seems like there'd be more success.
It's true. Mr. Olson is wearing 4 hats. However, his primary role is grants and contracts administration. So he has secured several grants and is regularly receiving emails and is on lists for notification of grants. So we are going after them. I think just having that presence, I mean, West Jordan is big in Utah. We're the 3rd largest city, and proudly so. But we're really small compared to lots of other places in the nation. So we really need to have our name out there. We need to somehow get people to stand up and take notice of who we are and what we do. So it really helps when we do have somebody to tell our story.
So is there a way to work in synergy with the proposed lobbyist, where we've got the grant writer and the lobbyist working together?
Absolutely. They would absolutely work very closely together.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Olson, about, I would say 60% of his job is actually grants and contracts.
So when we do get the report as to where things have been going with the grants, I'd be very interested to hear what's coming from folks other than Mr. Olson. I know police are frequently out looking for grants, fire is doing the same. I know there are other groups that have looked as well, but in conversations with them, I've heard expression that it would be helpful to have somebody who that's their sole focus. Knowing from my conversations with my wife, as she's done a number of grants before, it's very different, like technical writing plus extensive follow-up that's required, and it's just not something that most people thrive at. So we're lucky to have Jeremy who's able to do that with everything else, but that was one of the reasons that led me to suggest that perhaps we have somebody dedicated full-time to that, or someone whose full position is doing that, just so that we can get a little more breadth. There's a lot of things that are out there, seeing employees in various departments trying to kind of go out on their own and kind of figure things out. If we would have a higher opportunity of success, that's why I'm pushing for somebody whose sole focus is grant writing. So when that report comes, I'd love to see what the city is getting in addition to what Mr. Olson's been able to do.
That's absolutely the case. So this is interesting. The reason Mr. Olson's job has really morphed into this is we did see that need within the city, right? We had everybody all over the place, and I was trying to gather all the information because I'm responsible for reporting it in the audit as well. So we have a single audit that specifically looks at all of our grants. So it's a culture change, right? I mean, bringing it all into one house, but Mr. Olson has started a grants and contracts committee meeting, so they all get together. So it's all of our capital projects people, our police, our fire, our emergency management, and Mr. Olson and some of our finance team. So he's got a meeting and a committee together that has really helped. But again, it's going to take some time to change that culture, but he is very supportive of those other departments as they write, or he assists them in writing, or he'll write them for them.
What happened with when Mr. Tarver retired? Were Jeremy and Chuck kind of doing the same things and we lost that portion, or did what Chuck was doing move over to Jeremy?
Good question.
What happened there?
that would be Jeremy's other piece of his role. So it was really to clean up CDBG and the Big Ben program. He's done a phenomenal job of doing that with Lisa Elgin for CDBG. Jeremy's taken over the Big Ben project along with Isaac Astle. Isaac is managing the construction side of it and that side, and then Jeremy's managing the grants side and the coordination with all of those grants and the grant writing for that. So there's some of the grants that he's secured there. I think that you'll be impressed with the work that he's done and his report writing skill. It's really good, and I've worked with a few. He's really good. So
Thank you.
thank you.
There are two other items on the RCA that we've talked about before with funds. I think we need to, some of the, I'll just throw out before I talk about those two, that we really need to get to the Veterans Park Master Plan so that we know what we're doing with the arena, we know what we're doing with flagpoles, we know what we're doing with some other things, and I don't want to wait until next budget year if we have some money someplace to think about fixing some of those kind of things. So I'll just leave it at that.
Council Chair, may I chime in on, respond to Councilman
Yes.
Green on that issue? We do have currently open, because it was approved in the tentative budget, the park project manager position. We are out to receiving applications and actively searching for filling that position. Once we get that position filled, the Veterans Park Master Plan will be one of the very first things they take on. Now, it still will take some time, but that's where that stands.
The couple of issues that I still have with the budget, $35,000 for a citywide survey. Why? And $20,000 for an annual resident report. My question is why? We haven't done it for 2 years. We did a budget report this year. And I believe that there are ways using multiple electronic means to get an annual report out without having to send a mailer out that costs $20,000 to residents. I believe that there's ways to conduct surveys without going to an outside company and charging $35,000 and getting charged $35,000. And so, so in my mind, my question on those is why? And why can't we do an annual resident report? We put it on the website. We distribute it through, I mean, the West Jordan Journal puts their digital version of their newspaper out on Issue. It's a great tool, digital publishing software program, and it would cost us $1,200 for the year to subscribe to something like Issue, as opposed to putting $20,000 out for an annual report. And we can do multiple things. We can put it on the website. We can email people. We can text people. We can put, hey, our annual report's out. Go to this URL, and we can put it on the back of our envelopes for our water bill. There are lots of things that we can do that don't cost us $20K. And I think that we can survey residents for less than 30. So I'd like to see those two go and save us $50,000.
If there's support, if you're in favor, kind of give me an idea.
Do you mean, are we in favor of agreeing, or are we in
Yes,
favor
are
of
you in
keeping them
favor
in?
of taking those out?
All those in favor of being opposed to agreeing with this, please say yes.
Do you want to take out the 20 for the report and the 35 for the survey?
No.
You're good with having them there? Okay. Okay,
I agree with Calvin.
okay.
Either way, a bit ambivalent. I mean, the more information we can get, thank you. The more information we can get upon which to make better decisions is good, whether that's electronic for a cheaper amount or keep this in, so long as we're using it. I mean, if it's in the budget, let's use it. If it hasn't been used, you're right, why is it there? But let's do something for more communication and input.
Councilmember McConaughey.
I'm on the fence on this one.
So Councilmember Bloom, you were to take them out?
Correct.
Melissa, you're to take them out? Kelvin, you're to take them out? Denise, tell me what that would do for our property tax increase, or just close. What would it do?
Nothing. We could reduce it 50,000, but it's not gonna do anything. It would be 25 cents per resident, so it's not gonna be hardly anything.
Right,
It's
but
$1 million increase, or 970,000, so $50,000 is half of 0.5% of 1%. So it's not gonna make much difference. I would leave it in at the property tax increase and just not use as much reserves. Cause we're using reserves to pay off the bond.
Okay, I'm going to say that I'm okay taking them out currently, and then I guess where I'm coming from is I wanted a budget mailer to go out, and it didn't, even though the funding was there, right? And so then we put it together and it went out, but I want to have a little more input. I want the council to have a little more input on what gets sent out. And if we take it out and then something comes forward and is proposed and we want to expend the fund that way, we can.
I will let you know that it will change all the utility funds too, because those are allocated costs as well. So you'll see a pretty big change all over the place.
Okay. I think you've got 4 to take
Thank you.
those out.
Okay.
Have you
Sure.
got your 4?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember McConaughey.
Just thinking about it from a different perspective, if it's something that you might be interested in, if you had more influence or say, would it make sense to move that over to the council and make that a council budget item rather than a staff budget item? So we could then have a little more say on that? That way it's still there. It forces collaboration with the mayor's office. Hopefully we both come out ahead. If it's going to be an immaterial impact on the budget, it might not be a bad
Are
experiment.
you saying shift it to council contingency funds?
Either council contingency or council other, council communications, something like that.
I would say council professional technical services. It's pretty much where we put something like that.
There you go.
Okay, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
I could live with that.
You've got at least 4, because I'm okay, and Councilmember McConaughey, I think the fist bumping says Councilmember Pack too. So,
Okay, thank you.
all right. It is now 6:48, if my screen's right. And so is there anything else on the budget council members desire to bring up this evening? Otherwise, basically with the one change that we've made, the budget, well, the one change and the 2 that Denise brought up, our budget stands as what we've seen it. Councilmember Jacobs.
So the arts program thing that I mentioned before, I don't know that it's ready for prime time. I mean, I think we got to flesh it out a little bit. I think we can do it in this budget year, and if we do, we have contingency or we have reserve funds we could use for this first, and we could budget amendment it later. So that's kind of where I'm thinking with that. That was the thing that we didn't get brought up so far, so.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, I see nothing else, so we will stand adjourned until 7 p.m.